If there's one thing I've never understood, it's people who behave as if they own the place. That kind of neighbor who has no position but acts as if he signs the rules of the condominium. And it was exactly one of these that I had to deal with on my first day in my new apartment. I had finally moved into a decent building after years of saving money. Beautiful view, good location, reinforced security, all perfect, right? But I forgot to check one small detail before signing the contract: the presence of a lady who thought she was the sheriff of the condominium. On my first day, I realized that she was the kind of person who keeps tabs on other people's lives. I only had to pass through the hall to feel those eyes analyzing me as if judging whether or not I had the right to be there. But fine, I ignored it. But that same evening, when I went downstairs to get a hamburger I had ordered, this woman decided to speak up. I took my bag from the delivery man at the entrance and went back to the elevator. Everything was going well until out of nowhere she appeared in front of me and blocked the door with her foot. This elevator is for residents only. The first thing that crossed my mind was, well, who were you in the queue at the condominium to block other people's entry? But I tried to be polite. I know, I live here. Her response? An up and down stare as if she was trying to decipher me. No, you're a delivery man. Delivery men use the service elevator. For a moment I thought it was a prank. I looked around expecting someone to come out with a camera and shout, "I've got you!" But nothing. It was real. "Ma'am, I just picked up the food I ordered for me because I live here." But this woman's audacity knew no bounds. "Oh yeah, then show me a residence card." I laughed. She wanted me to prove that I lived in my building to her. I was already tired, starving, and that bag of burgers and fries was starting to weigh me down. I just wanted to go upstairs, eat and sleep. "Look, ask at the concierge. They just registered my apartment today, I swear." I thought that would solve it, but she just put her hand in front of my face and pushed me back a step. "I'm not letting you up until I'm sure." I looked at the doorman who was watching this scene from afar with a "here comes that woman again" look on his face. Just then, a woman with curly hair and glasses stepped out of the stairwell. "Everything okay here?" she asked, glancing between me and my interrogator. "Miranda is just performing her daily security theater," the doorman said with a barely concealed eye roll. He picked up the intercom and said, "Mike, he does live at 2205. I registered him today." The look on her face was priceless, but instead of apologizing, she doubled her bet. "Well, I have no way of knowing if you're not helping him get in. These days, you never know." Patience disappeared along with my hunger. I took the card from my pocket and swiped it on the elevator sensor in front of her. She looked at the display and remained silent. Her mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. "See? I live here. Now, excuse me." I got into the elevator and pressed the button before she could come up with another excuse. The doors closed, but I knew it was far from over. These kinds of people don't give up easily, and I was right. You know that feeling that someone is watching you? Over the next few days, I began to feel that way every time I left the house. That woman, who I had already mentally nicknamed the building inspector, couldn't get over the fact that she had lost our first fight. Now she was determined to prove that I didn't belong there. It started subtly. Whenever I passed through the hall, there she was, disguising herself by peering over the top of the gossip magazine she was pretending to read. If I took the elevator, she would appear out of nowhere and get in with me without saying a word. She just stood there, crossing her arms, looking at me as if she was waiting for me to commit some crime. Once, I came home from the market carrying bags, and as I was trying to balance everything to swipe my card in the elevator, I heard that forced voice of falsehood behind me. "Are you going to visit someone?" I looked over my shoulder. She was standing there with a smile that seemed to be stuck to her face. I took a deep breath, trying not to lose patience. "No. I live here, remember?" The smile disappeared, but instead of simply moving on, she gave me a look of mockery. She didn't say anything else. She just stood there looking at the floor display as if she were memorizing my route. I began to notice a pattern. She simply couldn't accept that I lived there. The final straw came one Saturday afternoon. I was on my way up after a run in the park, sweaty, with my clothes a little wrinkled, and of course, as soon as I entered the building, there she was, standing at the reception desk, as if she was waiting for me to arrive. This time, she didn't even disguise it. She marched up to the doorman and pointed at me. "He's always here, isn't he? Have you checked if he really lives on the 22nd floor?" The doorman, poor thing, couldn't stand this woman any longer. He looked at me with a "what's this again" expression before answering, "Mike, he's already registered in the system, that's all right." She crossed her arms and looked as if she couldn't believe it. "I see. It's just that he doesn't look like he lives here." That got to me. He doesn't look like he lives here? What exactly did that mean? What kind of person looked like a resident in that building? Before I could say anything, the doorman cut the mood. "If you have a problem, you can take it straight to the administration." The dry answer shut her up instantly, but I knew it wasn't the end. These kinds of people don't give up so easily, and I was right, because the following week, the neighborhood received an anonymous email warning about possible irregular residents in the building. I'm no psychic, but I'd bet my rent that this woman was behind it. If I thought that woman was going to get over the fact that I existed, I was sorely mistaken. Apparently, accepting that I lived in the same condominium as her was a personal affront. A week after the confusion in the elevator, all the residents received an anonymous email with a dramatic tone that sounded more like a national security warning than a condominium communique. It talked about unidentified individuals circulating in the building, suggested that not all residents were actually residents, and asked the management to be stricter with access. Seriously? What did she think I was? An undercover agent trying to bring down the building from the inside. Best of all, the next day she was at the reception desk, notebook in hand, pretending to be there casually. There was a moment when I caught this scene myself. I was waiting for the elevator when I overheard her talking to a couple who lived on the 23rd floor. The two exchanged a look like they didn't want to get into trouble, gave a generic answer, and walked off before she could go any further. And I stood there, watching it all in disbelief. She was really trying to turn my presence in the building into a mystery worthy of a police investigation. It was at that moment that I realized I had two options. Either I ignored her until she got tired, or I made it worth her while. Obviously, I chose the latter. Over the next few days, I paid attention to her routine. Every evening before going up to her apartment, she would take a tour of the building, observing everything with that look of someone who expects to find something wrong so they can complain. Then one fine day, while she was in the middle of her daily patrol, I went to the concierge and asked the doorman for a small favor. "Hey buddy, let's pretend our access card has stopped working, just for a few minutes," he laughed. I already knew her behavior, and apparently, I wasn't a fan either. I waited patiently, and then came the glorious moment. She got into the elevator, swiped her card on the reader, and nothing. She tried again. Nothing. She began to get impatient, pressing the button repeatedly, as if the elevator would obey on insistence. I, standing conveniently nearby, took the opportunity to make an innocent comment. "Strange, isn't it? Maybe your card is irregular. I think the management should check this out. You never know." Her expression was a mixture of shock and anger. For the first time, she had tasted being treated like a suspect in her own building, but I knew it wouldn't stop there. If there was one thing she didn't like, it was losing. And I was right, because the following week, the war began in earnest. After the joke with the access card, I thought she would finally understand the hint and get on with her life, but of course, I underestimated the ability of a person without a job to turn anything into a personal crusade. She wasn't going to let it go. And so, the following week, the building was taken over by a new kind of paranoia. Posters! That's right, printed posters, neatly organized, discreetly pasted on the walls of the elevators and near the mailboxes. The headline, "Attention Residents, Safety First." The text was a festival of absurdities, talking about new surveillance measures, encouraging people to report any suspicious behavior, and the icing on the cake, suggesting that it's important to get to know your neighbors to avoid unpleasant surprises, poorly disguised. I could even imagine this woman waking up early, printing out the posters with a Machiavellian smile, and going downstairs before everyone else to paste up her rules as if she were the condominium's highest authority. The funny thing, none of these notices were officially authorized by the management, but that didn't stop her from organizing little safety meetings in the party room, something that nobody had asked for, but which was now part of the residents' lives. Obviously, I didn't go, but luckily one of my neighbors showed up at my door with a summary of what had happened. Man, can you believe there was a whole meeting to discuss who actually lives in the building? Oh, I could very much so. At the meeting, she spent almost half an hour listing recent incidents, suggesting that it was very easy for someone to enter the building posing as a resident, and implying that certain people didn't look like they belonged there. Someone even asked if she had any proof that there was a real problem, but of course, the answer was a lesson in guesswork and wild theories. And as I expected, she wanted a new rule in the building. Residents would have to present proof of residence to the management. Yes, you read that right. The woman wanted everyone to prove that they lived where they lived. For a second, I wondered if she realized how ridiculous this suggestion was, but then I remembered that some people just live to meddle in other people's lives. The next day, the building management released an official statement, saying that the condominium had not implemented any new rules on proof of housing. That was the first real victory against her craziness, but if there was one thing I already knew, it was that she wasn't going to give up so easily. Now that her attempt to create a registry of residents had failed, I knew her next move would be even worse, and I was right because a few days later, the landlord called me in for a chat. Apparently, I had been formally denounced, and this time the story went far beyond a simple elevator. Arriving at the condominium and being called by the manager was not something I expected, but honestly, after everything this woman had done, I shouldn't have been surprised. I sat in the administration room on the other side of the table, while the manager flipped through some sheets of paper, looking like he had something serious to say. "We've received a complaint about you," he began bluntly. Good, now I was officially a case in the condominium's file. He slid a piece of paper across the table to me. It was a letter signed by her, a quote detailed dossier on my suspicious behavior. Among the pearls in the document were accusations that I had never been seen with family or friends in the building, that no one knew my real occupation, and the best of all, that I was possibly renting the apartment illegally and living there illegally. Do you have anything to say about this? Asked the manager tiredly. I paused for a second, looking at him and then at the sheet. It was so ridiculous that I couldn't even get angry. Yes, I do, I replied, reaching for my wallet and pulling out my ID and the contract for the apartment. This is my ID, this is the property contract. If I need to, I can get the deed and pay for a billboard outside with my name and photo in case anyone still has doubts. The manager let out a sigh of relief. Clearly, he couldn't stand this woman any longer either. That settles it, he said, picking up the papers. But just out of curiosity, why do you think she's so obsessed with you? That, my friend, was the mystery of the century, but I had a theory. Because coincidence or not, that same week I discovered that her son wanted to buy the same apartment I had bought. That's right, she didn't hate me for existing, she hated me because I bought the apartment she wanted for her son. That explained why she didn't accept my presence. In her mind, I was the reason her family's plans had gone wrong, and honestly, if that was her main motivation, it was pathetic. The manager rolled his eyes and said he would solve the problem, and solve it he did. 2 days later, it was announced that any unfounded complaints or harassment of residents would result in a warning and a possible fine. After that, she disappeared. No judgmental looks in the hall, no undercover interrogations, no rounds at the gate. She simply retreated into the insignificance of her own life, probably planning her next obsession. As for me, I carried on living in my apartment, enjoying my life without having to prove to anyone that I had a right to be there, and in the end, that was the best part of the story. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Want more stories like this? We've chosen 2 videos that you'll love. Just click on the card on the screen and see you in the next video. As I returned to my apartment that evening, I noticed my neighbor Sophia waiting by my door with a bottle of wine. Heard you finally put an end to Miranda's reign of terror, she said with a grin. I've lived here for 3 years and she's made everyone's life miserable at some point. The whole building is talking about it. Just defending my right to exist, I replied, unlocking my door and inviting her in. Well, we're all grateful. Some of us are planning a little floor party next weekend, to properly welcome you, now that the unofficial building dictator has been dethroned. Looking around my new apartment, my rightfully purchased, perfectly legitimate apartment, I smiled. Count me in.